Today's self-driving cars still require a lot of human supervision. My next panel will focus on the current autonomous environment, its risks, and its potential. Cathy Chase is the president of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Everette Bacon is a member of the board of directors at the National Federation of the Blind. And Eric Danko is the director of federal affairs at Cruise, General Motors' self-driving subsidiary. We were talking about Cruise a little bit earlier. It was really great to be with you all. Everette, I want to ask you a question. I want to start with you and say, I'd like our audience to get a picture, if you will, of the experience of those who are blind, who are sight impaired. What is the transportation world you live in today, and what do you think it should be?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for that. It's interesting. As a blind individual, I remember being 16 years old, and I grew up in California, and I had to take driver ed. And I remember everyone else around me and how excited they were about the chance to have independence and go on a date or whatever. And I wasn't going to be able to do that, being a legally blind individual. And fast forward now a number of years later, and I'm still looking forward to that opportunity of having that independence to be able to get in a car and go somewhere when I want and whenever I want. Also, I think about so many of our individuals who are blind that are not able to work because because transportation is a problem for them. And so that would be a great way to help individuals get back to work. Right now, the census showed in 2018 that over 7 million individuals identify as having a visual disability. And they think that number could double in 10 years with the aging population. So if you think about it, that's a lot of people that would benefit from autonomous vehicles and having that independence again.
Everette, I know you're in Utah right now, and I know that Cruise, we've been talking about, has got this pilot program in San Francisco, Waymo's in Phoenix. But are there any AV programs that you know of that are trying to work with you and the National Federation for the Blind where you are, or nationally?
On a national level, yes. Right now in Utah, there has been some autonomous vehicles in the trucking industry, as well as our Utah Transit Authority is looking at some of our buses. And I got to actually ride on an autonomous bus, which was pretty fun with Utah Transit Authority. But on a national level, there are definitely members of our organization are working with Phoenix, with Waymo, and with Cruise, and all over the country.
Well, thank you. Well, Cathy, I'm going to ask you a little bit about Eric Danko's work. Well, we'll leave Eric for a second, but I just went on to Cruise's website. I just did it right now on stage here, so I hadn't looked before. And it's cool. They basically talk about Poppy and Tostada are two of the the vehicles that you're going to be available in San Francisco, and you can sign up for the experience. But when they look at services, they have a line that says, crank up the volume, have a snooze, or enjoy the view. And I'm just interested, because it's a very different experience than the attentiveness culture that we have now, although lots of folks are on their iPhones and texting or whatever. But I'm just interested, as you sort of look at these convergence of highway auto safety, what are the important pieces to keep in mind as this new technology is going to create a lot of opportunity for folks like Everette, but also people like me who are incessantly distracted?
I'm very sad to hear that you're incessantly distracted. I hope it's not while behind the wheel.
No,
but you're right.
I work hard on that, but I'm just being honest.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that offline.
Okay.
With fatalities skyrocketing, it's a crucial time for us to be focusing on auto safety and on the path to autonomous vehicles, and we do hope we get there. Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety has always been very tech forward. I know these might not seem like technologies, but at the time, airbags, electronic stability control, rear view cameras even, these were all very forward tech, and now they're standard equipment. And that's why on the path to autonomous vehicles, we want to see some of the proven technologies, such as automatic emergency braking, and Steve, you mentioned before the lane departure warnings and corrections. We want to see some of these proven technologies put into cars now as standard equipment with minimum performance standards to start saving lives. And they're also the building blocks for autonomous vehicles. So it's really a win-win situation.
One of the things, to come back to the community that Everette has been working with, I think it's very powerful to kind of hear about the transportation deficit that many of his members have today, the autonomy that those folks want, and how autonomous vehicles can connect to it. But I guess the crazy thing is it kind of comes down to fundamentally a trust in technology as opposed to a trust in one's own thing. And when you look at the data, there's just no doubt that automated systems are safer. But I think if you go out and poll a lot of people, they're not there yet. What do you think are going to be the key building blocks of trust as new technologies come on? What has to be proactively and deliberately done to get trust in the safety element, which I know you're advocating for, but it just doesn't happen by saying it?
Regulation, regulation, regulation. Right now, people are going into auto showrooms and they think that the federal government has their back like they always have. They think that they go in thinking, I'm going to buy the safest car I can if one can afford it. And that's a big if, because right now these advanced technologies are there's an upcharge for them. But they have no idea by and large that there's no minimum performance standards for these technologies. And without that, there's going to be problems. In fact, just yesterday, it was reported in AP that NHTSA is doing an investigation on one of the companies for not complying with the standing general order to report to the agency for level 2 vehicles when they crash. I mean, it's an unfair imposition to think that that companies are just going to do the right thing. Some will, but consumers can't rely upon that. So that's why regulation is so essential.
That's great. Eric, I'm thrilled you're here, and I'm really happy we have you in discussion with Everette and Cathy, because I think part of what we have is we have a community of people who just this technology might be able to help, and we also have a lot of dimensions of safety and trust in systems. So if you can, tell us where their picture's right and how you're fixing it, and tell us where you're not there yet.
No, it's a great question. And before I dive into it, I just really want to thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation, really my fellow panelists for the opportunity to talk about something that we really are convinced is going to be transformative. Now, for those of you who don't know, Cruise is a fully electric self-driving vehicle company. We're partnered with General Motors, currently testing, developing, and deploying what SAE would call a level 4 self-driving service in San Francisco. So level 4, to the layperson, fully self-driving within a defined geofenced area. No opportunity for distractions. Steve, to your point, the vehicle takes care of every single element of the driving task. Now, to paraphrase Buttigieg's innovation principles, and this really goes to a lot of what Everette was talking about and to what Cathy's talking about too. Our mission is to build and deploy the world's most advanced self-driving vehicles, not for the sake of innovation alone. This isn't a science experiment, but it's fundamentally because the transportation status quo is not just broken, it's shattered. It's too unsafe, it's too polluting, and as Everette just identified, it's too inaccessible. Now, AVs really offer an opportunity to improve the status quo and to do so in a way that also supports the American workforce, American innovation, and allows this country to continue leading the world in a technology that we know is going to define the future of transportation. Now, at Cruise, we're going about this in a way that unlocks American manufacturing jobs. Our fleet of all-electric AVs currently on the road in San Francisco. Go out to the Bay, you will see them. They're built in Lake Orion, Michigan, contributing to over 1,000 union jobs today. And our purpose-built Cruise Origin is being built at GM's Factory Zero, which you may remember President Biden visited just a few months ago. There it's contributing to over 2,000 union jobs. Now, that's not counting the downstream impact these vehicles are already having. Here we're talking about supplier contract, service jobs, technician jobs, fleet operations, and the build out of one of North America's largest fast charging infrastructure facilities, built, by the way, by union workers and endorsed by the SF Buildings Trades. So in that respect, we really think that AV represents a model for 21st century American competitiveness. We are connecting high-tech innovation hubs, right? Companies like Cruise in San Francisco, with heartland manufacturing prowess, jobs and ecosystems being developed across the country. In terms of where we are, and you talked to Jason about this a little while ago, after millions of miles driven in San Francisco, which anyone who's there can tell you is one of the most complex urban environments in the country. 5 state permits from 2 regulatory agencies later, cruises are beginning to welcome members of the public to take rides in our fully electric driving vehicles. Now that marks a remarkable transition from R&D to early commercialization.
Right.
Now we're starting small, we're expanding methodically, and as always, we're gated by Safeway. But the question is not whether AV technology is here. It is.
Yeah.
The question is, will we continue to accept a broken status quo, or will we put this new technology to work?
Right.
Alongside other safe system approaches that Cathy's talking about, to save lives, create American jobs, decarbonize transportation.
Eric, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
It sounds very impressive. I just want to ask you a question because I think one of the fear factors is probably my own ignorance, but the ignorance of the folks who are out there that haven't experienced this yet, is we see a lot of drivers out there, and I tell folks, I was joking about myself being a distracted driver. I'm really not. But what does concern me out there are people who are distracted by iPhones, texting, others, a lot of accidents right now on that. How do you move us all into a world of AVs when not everyone's in an AV? How do you deal with the fear that, there's something inside me saying, wow, I just saw, someone texting and go through 3 lanes of traffic, and if I hadn't backed up, I would have been there. How does that AV, I'd just like to get practical and tell us how safety works in that situation.
It's a great question to ask, and I really appreciate the opportunity for it. At a base level, this is exactly what we're trying to solve for. One of the most contributing factors to the annual rate of fatalities on the road, you're talking about 40,000 deaths per year on US roads, right? Autonomous vehicles, put simply, follow the speed limit, follow the rules of the road, everything that you just identified. They don't get distracted, drowsy, or drunk, right? These are the behaviors that we know contribute to far too many preventable deaths. Now, in addition to that, right, what separates AVs from kind of human driving and learning is what we call fleet learning, right? So contrast it to how each of us drive on this panel, right? We drive as individuals and we learn as individuals.
Right.
My driving experience in no way informs your driving experience. If you're on your cell phone, if you're yelling at your kids in the back seat, it doesn't inform my behavior, and vice versa, right? In an AV fleet like Cruise, each car learns from the experience of every other vehicle in the fleet, which is to say that one vehicle experiences one thing one time and they all get better. That means that the vehicles are always improving with this up and to the right trajectory. So to be perfectly clear, we're not saying that AV should be the sole approach to lowering from it, right? With 40,000 deaths every year, we need every single tool at our disposal, but AV needs to be part of the box.
Everett, just as we close out, both to you and Cathy, I'd just be interested in your thoughts of what are the other dimensions here. Everett, I know, for instance, a lot of the questions about licensing the blind or the sight impaired has been an impediment to even thinking about how we move to this to the world that Eric just described. Would love to hear what other bit of the scaffolding is really important to take communities that haven't been part of the transportation picture in America and make it right for them. And I know, at least my team says, that driving licenses is one of these blind spots. But is there anything else you want to add before we close out today?
Well, definitely driver's license is a problem. That same Census Bureau survey turned out 15.9% of Americans over 16 do not own a driver's license. That's equates to 43 million individuals. So it's quite a large population that affects a lot of people, not just the blind and low vision. But the other thing that is extremely important to our community is accessibility. Right now, I'm using a computer and I'm using it successfully because it has a screen reading technology built into it. That type of technology is not available in vehicles today. My wife and I just purchased a new vehicle this past Friday that we're really excited about. It has nice voice activation software, so I can talk to it, but it has this awesome trackpad, and I would love to be able to know how to utilize that trackpad and how to check some of the different settings and different features, whether it be entertainment, whether it be information related to the vehicle itself. And I can't do that right now as it stands because accessibility has not been part of the forefront. We're kind of the afterthought, and it gets put in afterwards. And so it needs to be at the forefront. It would help so many of us and allow, again, that independence that I talked about before. And once we get to this level of where autonomous vehicles are everywhere, I'm going to want to be able to control my vehicle just like anybody else does as a blind individual who's independent.
Oh, great. And Cathy, I'm going to give the last word to you, but I want to ask you, basically about this transition, and that number of 40,000 deaths a year is just so stark. I once participated in this kind of high-tech crowd, founders of big Silicon Valley companies, and they were talking about, how could we end death through science? And it was really about a biotech kind of thing, looking at, cells and genetic coding. But another dimension is just smart regulation and technology and other levels I hadn't even thought of at the time. But I guess, as I sit here and, just coming back, to some of the prospects of what Eric put on the table of what this future could look like, how do we get there in a smart way? And what do you think, as we kind of look at this, I just wonder, why aren't we there now? I mean, I guess is the answer. What's getting in the way?
There's a lot to solve. And while I somewhat disagree with what Eric's saying about AVs being ready now based on what I've been seeing in the news, I hope that we will achieve that, but we really think that minimum performance standards that assure that a vehicle will perform as needed and as expected will happen. And that will, again, open up the possibilities for people with different disabilities. And in addition to people with blindness, there are people in wheelchairs. Will those people be accommodated in different autonomous vehicles? There are so many issues that really need to be addressed. And I would encourage people, if you haven't already, to look at our website, which is saferoads.org. And we developed a document called the AV Tenets. And we have 60 different stakeholders who have supported this document. And we really lay out a blueprint of how to accomplish the path to safe and equitable autonomous vehicles.
I would just say that these are the kind of conversations that I think help move these things forward, and I'm really excited by it. But I want to say a big thank you to Cathy Chase, President, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, Everette Bacon, a member of the Board of Directors of the National Federation of the Blind, and Eric Danko, the Director of Federal Affairs at GM's Cruise. What a cool conversation. Thank you to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our program today. A very big thank you to General Motors for its support of these conversations and to all of you attendees. For any of you who missed any of this, we're going to have the video up from the event on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.